the book's described as perfect for fans of Ruth Ware, Dark Wood, and Lucy Foley's The Hunting Party, and I love both of those. And they both have really strong settings, and the setting of the book in a castle in the Scottish borders is really, really atmospheric, and you sort of get transported there. What inspired you to set it there?
Well, I love setting. I get really excited about, particularly about getting out and about to do research. And for this book, it was nice because I got to do real world research instead of sitting in a library looking at pictures of the past. So I used to work for the National Trust for Scotland for a long time. And as one of my later jobs, I did a few jobs within the organisation, but was writing copy for their guidebook. And so I went around and stayed and visited lots and lots of different properties. And I suppose the castle down by the water is based very loosely on Craigievar Castle, which is actually up in Aberdeenshire. I transported it to the borders. Such is the magic of fiction. You can do that. Yeah, and I don't know what it was that grabbed me about that. I think it was because I've got this thing about things being slightly creepy when they are kind of slightly twee or kind of a little bit too good to be true. And this was the castle that Disney had supposedly seen that inspired the Cinderella's castle at Disneyland. There was just something that kind of grabbed me about that. There was also, I had this real desire to kind of pay a little bit of homage to Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca with the kind of the rhododendrons. I know it's azaleas and Rebecca, but like they're just kind of overwhelming and they're always there, and they're this sort of presence and this idea of being like swamped by the natural world, swamped by vegetation, the idea that kind of danger can come from anywhere. I think I guess one of the reasons why I like writing, I suppose my books do tend towards maybe sort of thrillers rather than straight crime novels, murder mysteries. But I think one of the things that I love about writing that kind of fiction is that, setting is so important. It's such an important part of atmosphere. So I guess that's where it came from.
Did it, the castle, I've completely lost my train of thoughts now, so I'm going to come back to that in a second. So this is not your typical hen party, is it?
Sure.
The girls are on, there's no inappropriate dress and bride-to-be sashes, but there are lots of secrets, and one of the party has a big secret. At the beginning, I'm not going to give too much away. So,
Sure.
At the beginning of the book, you say that some of the stranger happenings in this book are inspired by true events. Can you say a little bit more about that?
I guess I can. Yeah, I mean, it's in the public domain, I guess. So this book, I was talking with an editor at Wildfire, a wonderful woman called Kate Stevenson, who commissioned the book, and she had some ideas that I ended up weaving into this book, or they ended up becoming book. And one of this was this story that she'd heard. Now it did make newspapers, but I thought that Kate had heard it through a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. I think it's one of these kind of apocryphal stories, maybe like Slender Man, that's done the rounds. But there was a few years ago, there was a hen party that I think was at a lodge in the north of Scotland, in the Highlands somewhere, and an event which happens pretty early on in the book. I don't want to give it away.
No.
But an event that happens. Oh no, is it on the blurb? It's on the.
I think it is on. Well, it's definitely
on the blurb. I can give it away. Well, it is on the blurb, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
It is,
yeah. Okay. So they took some pictures, and when they looked back at the pictures, then the face of a little boy had appeared in the back of the pictures. And I mean, I know this is a kind of fairly common apocryphal story. You have this at boarding schools where like a face appears at a window or something like that. But there was just something quite captivating about the idea of it happening in the middle of the wilderness. That was kind of really the sort of sparking point. So I worked that into a couple of chapters that I sent to Kate, and then before she commissioned the book, and then the book kind of went from there.
Because that's what I remembered what I was going to say about the setting was quite often in sort of creepy houses, and definitely in the hunting party and things, they're set in the winter, whereas this one's sort of set sort of June, early but like you say, when the rhododendrons are out, spring. So that's quite a twist, isn't it, on it? Because traditionally they are dark. And
that's so interesting. I never even thought of that. Do you know, I never thought of that, but I definitely do have a creepy thing about summer. And there's this I live quite near this kind of nature reserve called Blackford Pond in Edinburgh, and my kind of least favorite time in a way to visit it is in the height of summer, because I love it in the spring, I love it in the autumn. It's great, it's beautiful in winter, but in summer there's so much vegetation, and the whole place, like, you know, it's called a pond. It is, I guess you could call it like a small loch, is a yeah, but it's big for a pond, but it's still got that stagnant kind of feel to it. And like in the height of summer, then the water rises and the air is very heavy with this kind of this pollen, just this like overabundance of like life. And I don't know, I do find that quite like smothering and quite sort of creepy. So it's interesting. That wasn't like a conscious decision to use nature in that way, but yeah, now you mention it, I mean, it's the time of year when like the mushrooms come out, the St. George's mushrooms come out, and and like flowers are starting to go into bloom, and maybe like the vegetation is starting to kind of come out of the earth and like creep back and like claim the things that we have laid claim to, you know, when it's been hiding in the winter time. So I you know, I'm riffing now. That wasn't in my mind when I like decided to say it then, but like it is definitely something that kind of
that's really interesting, and it was something that really I think stood out for me, because
cool,
because it's different, you know, it's very different than that sort of, you know, it's snowing, or you know, just that sort of dark, and the evenings get dark, and so you've got like the creepy face on the window or whatever. But yeah, it's interesting to have it set in. I was thinking about we've got the Lost Gardens of Heligan down here in Cornwall, and they have like a jungle. And sort of it's like these huge ferns and huge rhubarb, you know, the giant rhubarb, and they're very sort of oppressive when they're all out, aren't they?
Scary, aren't they? The giant rhubarb and stuff. Yeah. Actually, there's an Angela Carter story called it's in the Bloody Chamber, and it's called like the Elf King or something. It's set in a sort of a forest of just kind of overabundance, and everything is kind of like stifling and strangling and kind of terrifyingly lush in a way. And yeah, that's exactly that giant rhubarb is exactly the vibes I get when I see that.
It always reminds me of the Triffids. So you're probably too young to remember the day of the Triffids, but that terrified me when it was on the television.
Oh right, no, I remember my brother had the book. I didn't read it, but I remember seeing the book cover and being a bit scary.
It was terrifying. So the group are 7 university friends that you said, they've all stayed in touch, but they haven't really had much to do with each other, and they've all sort of gone off, haven't they, in different ways, directions. You know, some are in relationships, some have got really sort of powerful jobs, some of them you know, have had children. Are they based on people that you know, or characters that you've sort of encountered? Because I know some people like just see people in the supermarket and think, oh, they'd make a really good character, or are they just purely fictional?
I mean, they must come from somewhere. I haven't consciously based anybody in the book on anybody specific, but there's definitely like traits that you observe, and you observe them in yourself as well. Like, I'd be lying if I said that, you know, I have never behaved obnoxiously in my life, you know. It like, yeah, I think it's more to do with like the observation of traits that will come from somebody, but then you build that into a character that's like a kind of person in their own right, I suppose, a character in their own right. Definitely, like, I mean, some of the stuff that comes kind of later on, there's a character in the book that's got twins, and a lot of her like kind of, she sort of takes over as narrator for a large portion of it. And yeah, I mean, like a lot of her kind of her observations and her experiences are kind of, I suppose, like mirror my own in a way. That she'd probably be the most like autobiographical character. But yeah, it's more like they're a mishmash. But yeah, I do that as well. Like, I spot people in the street and kind of wonder about them, or people that you kind of, it's easier when you sort of vaguely know someone, I think, when you know someone intimately. If you know someone really intimately, it's really hard to like separate all the different kind of components of like their tics or their characteristics and things. So But if there is somebody that maybe you knew at university and they had a particular habit, or they had a particular way of behaving, or they always dominated the conversation, or they always stabbed you in the back,
Yeah.
then you kind of remember those incidents rather than the person as a whole.
You can get your own back then, I guess.
I try not to. I mean, it's
stabbing your back ones.
Yeah. Well, you want to. I mean, yeah. You I suppose some of the incidents that they have a little rousing game of "I have never" at one point, and
Yeah.
one of my friends texted me, was like, "Yeah, thanks for putting in my shoplifting habit." I'm so sorry, I didn't even realize I was doing that. Yeah. Yeah. I don't.
There's some real shockers in there, isn't there, as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, it's not none of it's based on the truth and things, but you want to serve the story as well, and you want to those kind of more outlandish moments, or those kind of more exaggerated moments are obviously going to be more exaggerated than things that happened.
I mean, they are really a really interesting group, aren't they? The dynamic and the sort of relationship.
One word for it.
Yeah.
That's kind, though. People have said a lot worse about them.
Well, I mean, I can't say that any of them that I was sort of I liked any of them, but I always think that that's quite good in a way for me. I mean, I think unlikable characters are much easier to sort of get engrossed with, because that there's the potential that they could do something that you don't like.
100% agree, absolutely agree. And it's a thriller, that's where the kind of friction and, like you say, that danger comes from. I mean, it's not, you pick up this book and it's not the Cupcake Cafe, it's not going to be that way. And it's yeah.
But did you have a favorite when you wrote? I mean, obviously you can't give too much away about who does what, but was there anybody that you really enjoyed writing?
I mean, I love writing villains. I really do. You just tap into something that some heightened level of obnoxious behavior. And so I had a lot of fun writing Georgie. I really did. Writing her. She's pretty obnoxious from the off. I don't think it's a spoiler to sort of call her a villain. But yeah, I had a lot of fun just riffing and playing around with all the kind of things that she might, imagining what she might say in particular circumstances and situations and stuff. And I mean, it's nice as well, trying to build. I struggle a little bit more to build nice characters, but that's when that's where a great editor will help. They'll kind of help you build a more holistic, rounded character by kind of asking the right questions and asking you to probe into their backstories in the right way. So in that respect, I had fun developing Tessa, with Kate's help. And what are the? I mean, Melissa is quite fun as well, because she's the kind of slightly more hippy dippy, and I had fun, but it's not a it's obviously it's my first contemporary thriller, but it's also my first kind of ensemble piece as well, and I haven't written anything like this before, where you've had to manage quite a large cast of characters, and that brought enormous challenges in the first couple of chapters, particularly because you're trying to differentiate without making anyone into a caricature. But then once I kind of settled into it and I kind of had a handle on the different ways in which they all behave, I had a lot of fun writing the dinner scene, because then you kind of, I feel like the readers probably got a handle on who everybody is, and so you can kind of then just have fun letting their behaviors sort of come out and emerge.
It is, isn't it? Because in the very in the first chapter or so, we really sort of get to sort of introduce, and it does take a little while, doesn't it, when you have a bigger group of characters to sort of, for the reader to bed into who they are and their personalities and get to know them. So I thought that was it was I can imagine it was quite difficult to keep a handle on them all, because they were quite an unwieldy bunch.
They did. They kept running off in different directions and wanting to get up to mischief. Could never keep tabs on where the hell B was. Yeah.
This is your first contemporary thriller, isn't it? Was that quite a change for you, writing from your previous novels, which are still thrillers but historical thrillers?
Yeah, it was. And I think it was the right time for me to do it. I'd always wanted to write a contemporary thriller. I'd always had in my mind that I was going to do some kind of contemporary thrillers, possibly with a different name, as I've done, because I want to still keep writing. I mean, I suppose you develop a sort of your own kind of like voice, or they would call it like brand and marketing and stuff. But like my historical thrillers are quite fairly lighthearted in a way, and maybe they're not lighthearted, I don't know, but they're different. They're a little bit like sort of heightened from, they're not straight historical thrillers, they're more like a kind of a slightly melodramatic version of history, or I don't know how to describe them, but yeah, I wanted to do something contemporary. And after I had kids, then I basically just did not have the time or the bandwidth to do that level of historical research. So, you know, when the opportunity came along to like audition, basically to like write this book, it was just like the right project for me at the right time, you know. And yeah, and I had a lot of fun like building it and being able to like having the freedom to like build it from real life rather than kind of, it's not like when you're writing historical fiction, like you're wedded to the facts and things, but you are hamstrung by, you know, you can never go there and walk around. And even with the Amber Shadows I wrote, that was set in Bletchley Park, and I spent like 4 days in Bletchley Park wandering around and stuff, but you know, you still have this feeling of like you're trying to push through gauze to actually touch and see and know everything and feel like what the people were doing and how they were interacting and how they were behaving. And you know, with Down by the Water, it was just like, you know, you're off because you know, everyone's got a group of friends, everyone knows someone that's like Georgie, I don't know who they do.
Yeah, did you sort of miss the research part of it, or did you like enjoy, did you find it quite freeing? Because
I find it freeing actually, and that was why I think that, you know, the next book that I dived into writing straight away was another Elle Connell book. I really enjoyed it, and it really just kind of came pouring out much more quickly than the historical books. And it was also nice as well because like it was doing research on the ground, so I went to stay at Craigiebar Castle for a few days, and that was really lovely just to sort of think, you know, I'm kind of gathering research in a very sort of like real-time way. And and even just sort of, I suppose when you're writing contemporary fiction, then even just like being out and about and like, you know, performing one of my favorite activities, eavesdropping in cafes and stuff, was like, that kind of counts as research. You know, you don't have to be chained to a library. Or the last book I wrote before this actually didn't get published, and I'm reworking it at the moment, that's set in the 18th century, and I haven't even been researching in the library for it because all of the original source material that I've been using is all digitized. So it was a year of just like staring at my laptop trying to, you know, zoom in on PDFs of facsimiles of like 18th century documents, and that just gets quite like after a while. So this was really nice. Yeah, I think it was freeing.
I mean, it's is there any other sort of genre that you would quite like to write, or are you sort of wedded to thrillers?
I'm wedded to dark happenings. So I think you know, I think the next Elle Connell book moves slightly more. I don't really understand branding, but apparently it's more psychological horror than thriller. Yeah, so I don't like, definitely kind of going down the sort of more horror and grotesque. And like, you know, I'm really into kind of grotesque comedy. That's a sort of fun, I mean, it's a difficult balance, or rather it's a difficult, I think, to sort of approach and say I'm going to write. I find it difficult to say I'm going to write something funny, but you kind of hope when it sort of comes out that like that what I'm drawn to is like ridiculous or exaggerated situations. So you kind of hope that there's like an element of like the kind of ridiculous or the humorous to that can be found even through the darkness. So yeah, so I suppose, yeah, is there another genre, like another sort of straight down the line genre? I can't see myself ever writing like a straight romance. Or even wanting to write a sort of straight contemporary literary serious take me seriously kind of novel. You know, I've always loved genre fiction. I've always loved like blockbuster movies as well. I've always loved things that are like aware of their own kind of entertainment value, and like, you know, that really engage in that sort of dance with the reader or the viewer. And yeah, I just like that.
I love a thriller. I mean, they're definitely one of my favorite genres to read. I think
me too.
I just like that sort of being absorbed, you know, going in and, you know, wanting to find out what's going to happen, and quickly as well. I do like it. You know, I'm reading The Essex Serpent at the moment, which is,
right, I haven't read that. I'd love
to.
It's
so good. It's so good, but it is quite. It's long, and it's very. But that's, you know, that has got lots of darkness in it, and it's beautifully written. and so sometimes I do want that type of read, but then other times I want a quicker sort of
Sure.
grab me now. I want to read this quickly. And
yeah, I know what you mean. You've got to like shake it up a bit.
yeah.
I find that between fiction and non-fiction as well. Like if I've been reading too much fiction, then I'll kind of want to dive out and just like read some non-fiction, and then I can kind of really sort of engage with it much more smoothly or quickly. And then you want to like dive back into fiction and sort of like refreshes your brain a little bit.
And there's a really great feeling of sort of fear and trepidation in the book, because you don't, without giving too much away, you don't really know what's happening, do you? So you sort of know, I'm not going to give too much away. So was it difficult to write this and conceal the big secret in the book without giving it away? Because obviously
that's a really interesting question, and I think the answer is like yes and no. I think the answer is I don't really know what I'm doing when I'm doing that. And I think it sort of is because you put yourself, like you ventriloquize, you sort of go into the world of the character, so you only know as much as they know. And in that respect, then, so long as you sort of stay within those rules, almost like, almost like an improvisational game, then there shouldn't really be any need to sort of do any artificial controlling of the release of details and stuff. You are experiencing it as the characters do, and so you're going to start noticing things as and when they do, if that makes sense. I don't know, it's so in The Amber Shadows, which is the book that was my second historical thriller, a lot of people kind of said like, oh my goodness, like there's so many red herrings in here, and like, there's just, whoa, so much suspense, how did you build all that? And I was like, I didn't, I just kind of, I kind of knew where I was going, but like I sort of just did, it was very, I hadn't done it intentionally.
no.
So yeah, I don't know, I think you just sort of, it's like kind of feeling your way in the dark in a way. You just sort of feel your way through the book, and sometimes it feels right to kind of discover something, and that's when the character discovers something. I don't know, does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I think as a non-writer, you can't really understand how that happens, so sort of naturally. But I think if you think about how you want your character to be, I assume that, like you say, it just, so many people say that it just sort of happens, and they sometimes do things that you don't expect them to do, and
right.
So yes, it does make sense. I think it is difficult, isn't it, to sort of put yourself in somebody else's, because I imagine to everybody it comes differently, the writing process. So some people have very strict, I am planning every single thing of this, and it's going to be like this, and then other people, like you say, just go with it and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think I do a bit of both. Sorry, my leg is really cramping up. I'm just going to rearrange my cushions. I'm not going to lean on that one. Hang on. I've got a bit of like a precarious table with my laptop on it. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, and I do a bit of both. So when I'm writing a novel, then when I'm writing historical fiction, then I do plan out I have to plan out where the story's going, and plan out the next sort of 6 or 7 chapters. Otherwise I will just get myself into such a flap, I won't be able to sit down and write anything. And I learned that the hard way, because I decided after planning 2 novels, that for my 3rd historical novel, then I wasn't going to plan. I was going to approach it the way I approach a short story, which is a lot more kind of organically. I don't tend to plan short stories. I like the idea that you, as the writer, kind of don't know exactly where you're going, because I think that really comes across in the sort of, it's not exactly a danger, but the thrill of reading a short story can often be that it just takes you in completely unexpected directions, doesn't necessarily need to kind of hit the same sort of beats, or if it does, they can be syncopated, or it can turn different corners. And so I like kind of going into a short story blind a little bit. But for me anyway, trying to apply that to writing a novel, the result was just a little bit of a mess. And I was just left with like a novel that needed a lot of like mechanical kind of reworking, and like looking very technically at the sort of whose story was this, and it just kind of didn't work for me. So but with Down by the Water and with the book that I've just written, the next Elle Connell, then I didn't really sit down and plan those quite so heavily as I do with the historical fiction. And I think that's because I had a little bit more confidence that I knew where I was going and that I knew what needed to happen. And that's possibly because they are more closely linked to the very specific genre. There may be more genre books. I'm not quite sure why. Or maybe I just had like a more of a sort of feel for the story. I didn't approach in the way I approached a short story. So I kind of knew what was going to happen, but it was like I didn't need to sort of write a plan because I kind of could hold all of that in my head while I was writing. I had a feel for where the story was going. So yeah, I guess in terms of like planning and stuff, it just depends what I'm writing.
Is it what was your journey? Well, I'll get my words out. What was your journey into being published and writing? Was it quite a quick one? Was it a long process?
What do you mean, like in general, like from the very start of?
Yeah,
Like,
so from when so with your first two books, sort of, yeah, how, because did you do shorts? So you've obviously you had lots of, you've sort of entered competitions and got prizes, and you've done short stories. Was that the way you went into it and then it became a novel, or did you do a bit of both?
Not really, no. I had I really, when I was at university, I really thought I wanted to go into playwriting and acting and some works in the theatre in some kind of context. And my master's was a sort of half practical master's at the Globe, and so we did a lot of like kind of working with like the movement coach there and the voice coach and the dramaturgs and stuff, and that was really a direction I wanted to go in. And I wrote some plays, and I did the Royal Court's Young Writers Programme. And Hourglass Factory was a play that I wrote in a very, very different form for the Young Writers Programme. And it was very surreal. It was very kind of fragmented. I kind of wanted to play around with, I don't know if anybody knows this play. It's one of my favorite plays by Liz Lochhead, called Mary Queen of Scots Got Her Head Chopped Off. And she plays like really kind of radical games with history and kind of has this kind of punkish mashup of like contemporary references with history. And the original Hourglass Factory was a play kind of attempting to be like in that vein. And, it didn't get off the ground. And I sort of put it to bed for a little while. And I kind of eventually realized that temperamentally I was probably more suited to writing a novel because it's just a little bit more, well, it's a lot more like kind of solitary. It is less collaborative, although it is still collaborative, I think. Yeah, so then I decided at some point that I was going to like start reworking Hourglass Factory into a genre piece, because that was, it's kind of had this like moment of like, well, what books do I like to read? And so I wanted to rewrite it as like a historical thriller. So I did that, and then I managed to get, I wasn't signed by my agent when I got the New Writers Award, but I was like talking with her. I was kind of managed to get a couple of agents interested, and then I ended up working with my agent, who's still my agent, on it. And during that time when we were like polishing up the manuscripts to put on submission, then I got the New Writers Award, and that was just like, it was just the best thing that happened to me in my career. It was everything like that got me off the ground. If anybody's tuning in from Scotland, like, and is interested in and trying to get published and trying to get a writing career off the ground, the Scottish Book Trust are just absolutely, the work they do is just incredible, supporting and elevating, training, amplifying the voices of new writers. So they have this scheme, the New Writers Awards, where they award 10 awards each year, and you get a bursary, so you've got some time hopefully to invest in your own writing. You also get mentored, you get training on publicity, on public speaking. They're just there at the end of the phone if you like want to ask an industry question or anything like that. And through them, then I ended up going to an event called Pitch Live, which is where writers were able to pitch their work one-on-one to editors. And that's where I met Claire Hay, who went on to edit my first two books. And so it all just kind of stemmed from there. It was really, the catalyst was really the Scottish Book Trust. And during that time, I was also, it wasn't really until after I got my New Writers Award that I realized, I was like, I'm not writing short stories. Maybe I should be. And so I started writing short stories and sending them out. Yeah, so that kind of came later. And it's been something that I think has really helped develop me as a writer. But I think, but also it's just great because when you finish one project, you might not want to necessarily launch headfirst into another one. Or I used to use short stories, for example, when I had more time before I had children. I would write short stories when my book had gone off to the editor for it's a round of edits, and then I would I'd have a couple of weeks, so I'd write a short story, and so yeah, they kind of like worked in tandem.
Yeah, I mean,
now I haven't written a short story since I gave birth 3 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, they take up a lot of headspace. and so do children. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
kind of
they
been
definitely
a bit
do.
of a swap.
So
Yeah.
I've got a comment from Karen, another Karen, who says that she read and enjoyed The Amber Shadows, and
Oh,
the new
thank you.
thriller sounds great. So,
That's really kind. Thank you, Karen. Really,
and
really
it
appreciate it.
definitely is. I haven't read The Amber Shadows, but I am going to now because
Oh, thank
sounds
you.
really good. So what do you like to read, Lucy? And have you read anything lately that you recommend to us?
I've got pretty broad tastes in fiction and non-fiction actually. I like to read a bit of everything. Sometimes then a book that's just come out will catch my eye, and sometimes I'd like to sort of revisit classics. I discovered when I decided that I wanted to really kind of try and knuckle down uh, on writing a contemporary thriller, then I realized that I hadn't actually read any Ruth Rendell, and like that was like oh my god, she's amazing. And so like yeah, powered through like several of her books, and her Barbara Vine books are just like next level. I absolutely love them. I think she finds menace in the domestic in a way that's just so utterly terrifying and powerful, and it's so terrifying because you just when you read her books you think this could happen to me, and that is more terrifying than a crazy psycho in like a
Yeah.
raincoat lurking around the corner. So yeah, she's someone that I definitely intend to be working steadily through the back catalogue. But I've got some books that I've been reading recently. I read this. I just finished this because I'm doing an event with Susie Holiday on Saturday, and it's
Oh,
really, really good fun. What I love about it is it's got definitely got an Agatha Christie vibe, but you really feel like you're in the hands of an amazing storyteller who's like toying with you at every turn, and it also plays like it gets under the skin of like the kind of gruesome horror of big tech, which is something that terrifies me personally. So, and she really like leans into that and plays with it. So I definitely recommend this one. I also just read, actually I read it a while ago now, but I really like this book. You Know You Want This. This is Kristen Rupinian's. She wrote Cat Person,
yeah.
which went viral, and it's her short stories. And I think she writes really well about awkwardness, physical intimacy. Yeah, just quite like she finds horror in dating scenarios, which I do too. So it's cool. Yeah, and then I'm reading this book, which is nonfiction on killing. It's about
Oh,
it's interesting. Yeah, it was written by a former soldier, and I read about this book in Jason Fox, the SAS guy's
oh yeah.
autobiography, Battle Scars. That's a really good read, really good, and I've been recommending it to anyone who wants to read a really candid, like no holds barred book about men's mental health. And he's just very, I mean, he's worked with a ghostwriter, he acknowledges, but like the pair of them together have created something that's like incredibly honest and like doesn't sugarcoat anything, but also doesn't apologize for it. It's just very good. But he mentions this book, so I thought I would give it a read because I'm writing about soldiers at the moment. And then I haven't started reading this yet. This is an Agatha Christie that I've never heard of it. It's yeah, it's a Poirot apparently, but I picked it up in a secondhand bookstore because I love the cover. Look at
What's it
that.
called? I can't see. Oh, the third girl.
Absolutely mental.
Oh,
It's
well,
something terrifying.
it's actually a really good book. I've read it.
The third girl, have you? Okay.
Yeah, it is. I didn't. It wasn't one of my favourites because I'm a real Agatha geek, I'm afraid. So
Oh,
I've
oh
got them
no.
all behind me.
Oh,
Um,
amazing.
but it's not one of my favourites, but it's good. It's very
Worth a
clever.
read. Awesome.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. Well,
but
I
I
will
love
probably
those
be reading.
covers. They're just so that is that a pan or a fontana?
It's Pan. Yeah, it's Pan.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've got a
yeah.
whole bunch of these as well. From when I was a teenager, I used to go collecting them back when you could kind of pick them up in secondhand bookshops fairly easily. And I've got like all the Miss Marples in like really nice vintage editions, and I did start collecting the Poirots, but yeah, it's not very often that you come across one.
Not anymore. No,
Yeah,
they make silly money, some of them,
they
but
do, sure.
yeah, that's really interesting. I'm glad that you sneaked Agatha in there. So you've got that one to read, have you?
Yes, that one's to read. I haven't started that one yet, and the other one, the two fiction books I have read, and then the On Killing I'm in the middle of at the moment.
Brilliant. Well, that's great. Thank
Pile.
you. That's great recommendations. Um, so we're nearly at the end now. What's next for you?
So there's another Elle Connell book that is just in the final stages of being edited at the moment. I've had a lot of fun working on it. It's quite sordid and dark. And so I can't actually tell you the title of it because we're undergoing some changes in that department at the moment. But yeah, so that's hopefully all things going smoothly and to plan, touch wood, kind of come out next year. I've also just been writing another historical novel. It's the one that's set in the 18th century, and I've been reworking that, and that is about a singer of murder ballads who kind of becomes acquainted with a female opera composer, and it's about the sort of slightly dysfunctional power imbalance relationship that they have, which ends up in resulting in a murder. And I'm still just finishing that at the moment. I'm hoping to get it to my agent fairly soon. But yeah, that's what's been keeping me busy.
That sounds fascinating. I really love the sound of that. That sounds very unique. I should be waiting for that one to come out. So when do you think that one will be?
Well, I don't know. I haven't got a publisher for that one yet. So so I just need to, I think that it's probably going to be a bit of a long process of backing and forthing with my agent before anything happens there. But yeah, the Elle Connell one, all things going smoothly, should be out next year.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been really, really interesting to talk to you and to find out about how you write and all the exciting things that you've written before as well. So if you would like to read any of the books that we've discussed this evening, they are available to order via Devon Libraries and Torbay Libraries, and also from our friends at the Bookery. And the links are in the chat for those. I'll put it up again because it's this is the proof. I've got the proof. I don't know what the
I've got the proof as well. It's the same.
Yeah. So our next In Conversation is on Tuesday, the 21st of September. I forget what month we're in. At 7 o'clock, and I'm delighted to be joined by the best-selling couple, journalists Nikki Gerard and Sean French, who write under the pseudonym of Nikki French, and this is their book. They've written 23 novels together and have sold in excess of 15 million books worldwide. So they'll be talking to me about their latest novel, which is called The Unheard. So if you'd like to join us then, please do. And if you've enjoyed our chat this evening, please like and comment on our page. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks.